The collection plate passed down the pew, and I placed my envelope inside like I had every Sunday for 43 years. $50, same as always. But this Sunday was different. This Sunday, I was also carrying a cashier's check for $50,000 made out to St. Matthew's Building Fund. Pastor William had announced it 3 months ago. The church needed a new fellowship hall. The old one was falling apart, unsafe for gatherings. The building committee had set a goal of $800,000. My late wife Margaret and I had always planned to make a significant donation when the time came. She'd passed 2 years ago, and I knew she'd want me to help. After the service, I found Robert Chen, our church treasurer, in his office counting the collection. Robert was 65, had been treasurer for 12 years, always meticulous, always kind. We'd served on committees together, had coffee after services, considered ourselves friends. My name is David Morrison. I'm 69 years old, a widower, retired from teaching high school mathematics for 35 years. St. Matthew's Episcopal Church has been my spiritual home since Margaret and I moved to this town in 1981. I'd watched the congregation grow, seen children baptized who were now bringing their own children. The church wasn't just a building to me. It was community, family, faith made tangible. "Robert, I have something for the building fund," I said, handing him the check. He looked at it and his face went pale. For just a second I saw something flash in his eyes. Fear? Panic? Then it was gone, replaced by a warm smile. "David, this is incredibly generous. The building fund committee will be so grateful." Margaret would have wanted this. We'd talked about it for years. She was a wonderful woman. Robert tucked the check into a folder. "I'll make sure this gets deposited first thing Monday morning. You'll receive a receipt for tax purposes within a week." I left feeling good, doing something Margaret would have approved of, helping the church we both loved, contributing to something that would serve the community for generations. The receipt never came. After 2 weeks, I called the church office. "Hi, this is David Morrison. I'm calling about a receipt for my building fund donation." The secretary, Linda, sounded confused. "Building fund? Let me check with Robert." She put me on hold. When she came back, her voice was hesitant. "David, Robert says he doesn't have a record of a building fund donation from you. Are you sure you gave it to the general fund instead?" "No, I gave Robert a check for $50,000 specifically for the building fund 2 weeks ago, right after the service. I'll have him call you back." Robert called that afternoon. "David, I'm so sorry for the confusion. Your check is here. I just hadn't processed the paperwork yet. You'll have your receipt by the end of the week." Something in his voice didn't sound right. Too smooth, too reassuring. But I told myself I was being paranoid. This was Robert, my friend, the man who'd visited Margaret in the hospital, who'd helped organize her memorial service. The receipt arrived Friday. Official church letterhead, Robert's signature, acknowledging my $50,000 donation to St. Matthew's Building Fund. I filed it with my tax documents and tried to forget the uneasy feeling in my stomach. 3 months later, Pastor William made another announcement. "The building fund has reached $400,000. We're halfway to our goal. Thank you all for your generosity." 400,000? I'd given 50,000 alone. I knew Tom and Susan Green had donated 25,000. They'd mentioned it at a church dinner. The Johnsons had given 30,000. Just from people I knew personally, we should be well over 100,000. Where was the rest of the money? After the service, I approached Pastor William. "William, can you tell me who's on the building fund committee? I'd like to get more involved." "Oh, we don't have a formal committee yet. Robert's been handling all the donations, keeping track of everything. Once we get closer to the goal, we'll form a committee to oversee the construction." "So Robert is managing all the money?" "Yes, he's our treasurer. That's his responsibility." "But there's no oversight? No one reviewing the accounts?" Pastor William looked slightly offended. "David, Robert has been our treasurer for 12 years. He's never given us any reason not to trust him. Are you suggesting something?" No, I was curious about the process. I went home troubled. Maybe I was overreacting. Churches operate on trust, on faith in good people doing the right thing. But I'd been a math teacher for 35 years. I believed in verification, in checking the work, and making sure the numbers added up. That evening, I called Tom Green. Tom, you donated to the building fund, right? 25,000, yes. Why? Did you get a receipt? Of course. Robert sent it the same week. And Pastor William announced today we've raised 400,000 total. Does that seem low to you, given what we know people have donated? Tom was quiet for a moment. Now that you mention it, yes, I know at least 5 families who gave significant amounts. We should be over 500,000 by now. That's what I thought. David, what are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just checking the math. I spent that week asking discreet questions. Started with people I knew well, people who'd been open about their donations. The Johnsons confirmed 30,000. We gave it right after Easter, Martha Johnson said. Our tax refund came in and we felt called to give it to the church. Robert said he'd personally make sure it went to the building fund. The Williamsons had given 15,000. It was our anniversary gift to the church. 40 years of marriage, 40 years at St. Matthew's. Seemed fitting. The elderly Patterson sisters, Agnes and Ruth, both in their 80s, had donated 10,000 each from their late brother's estate. Franklin wanted his money to go somewhere meaningful. He wasn't a churchgoer himself, but he knew how much St. Matthew's meant to Ruth and me. We were so proud to make that donation in his memory. Each conversation broke my heart a little more. These weren't wealthy people showing off. These were ordinary people making sacrificial gifts, believing they were building something permanent for their community. I kept a notebook documenting everything. Tom Green, $25,000, Johnson's, $30,000, Williamson's, $15,000, Patterson sisters, $20,000 combined, my own, $50,000. That was $140,000 from just 6 sources.
Then I talked to Helen Martinez, who ran the church bookstore. I gave $5,000, she said. It took me 2 years to save it. I work part-time at the library, you know. That money represented a lot of overtime shifts. The Chens, no relation to Robert, had given $8,000. The Thompsons, $12,000. Young couple, both teachers like I'd been, with 2 small children. We wanted our kids to grow up in a church with a good fellowship hall, Sarah Thompson said. Somewhere they could have youth group meetings, church dinners, community events. By the end of the week, I documented $235,000 from 14 different sources, and Pastor William had announced only $400,000 total. The math didn't work. Sunday after church, I waited until Robert was alone in his office. "Robert, can I see the building fund ledger?" He looked up sharply. "Why?" "I'm a numbers person. I'd just like to see how we're tracking toward the goal." "Robert, I don't share financial records with congregation members. That's confidential information." "I'm not asking for individual donor information, just the total contributions and current balance." "I report to Pastor William and the vestry. If you have concerns, take them up with them." His tone was cold, defensive. This wasn't the friendly Robert I'd known for years. This was someone hiding something. I went to Pastor William. "I'd like to see the building fund records." "David, Robert is very upset. He feels like you're questioning his integrity." "I am questioning the numbers. They don't add up." "Robert's been treasurer for 12 years without a single problem. Then showing me the ledger should be easy." Pastor Williams sighed. "I'll ask Robert to prepare a report for the next vestry meeting. You can attend and see the numbers then." The vestry meeting was 2 weeks away. I spent those weeks talking to more church members, quietly asking about donations. By the time the meeting arrived, I had documentation of over $300,000 in contributions that should have gone into the building fund. At the vestry meeting, Robert presented his report. According to his ledger, total building fund contributions were $412,000. Current balance was $412,000. Everything matched perfectly. "Robert, I have a question," I said. "Can you show me the bank statements for the building fund account?" "The bank statements are in my files at home. I can bring them next month." "I'd like to see them now, or better yet, let's all go to the bank tomorrow and review the account together." Robert's face flushed red. "David, I'm getting tired of these accusations. If you don't trust me, maybe you should find another church." "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking for transparency. If the money is all there, showing us the account should be simple." Pastor William intervened. "Gentlemen, please. David, your request is reasonable. Robert, can you arrange for us to review the building fund account at the bank this week?" Robert's hands were shaking. "Fine. Friday at 10, First National Bank." I barely slept that week. I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some explanation for the discrepancies I'd noticed. But the fear in Robert's eyes told me I wasn't wrong. Friday morning, I arrived at First National Bank at 9:45. Pastor William was already there. Robert arrived at 9:55, looking exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. We met with the bank manager, a professional woman named Sarah Martinez. "We'd like to review the St. Matthew's Episcopal Church Building Fund account," Pastor William said. Sarah looked at her computer. "I don't see an account under that name." "It would be under Robert Chen's name as treasurer," Robert said quickly. Sarah searched again. "I have several accounts for St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, general operating account, music fund, outreach fund, but nothing labeled building fund." Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "It's a sub-account of the general fund." Sarah pulled up the general fund. "This account shows regular deposits of collection plate contributions and regular withdrawals for operational expenses. There's no separation of a building fund within this account." Pastor William turned to Robert. "Where is the building fund money?" Robert stood up abruptly. "I need some air." He walked out. Pastor William and I exchanged a look and followed him outside. Robert was sitting on a bench, head in his hands. "Robert, where is the money?" I asked. "I don't have it." The words hung in the air like a bomb. "What do you mean you don't have it?" Pastor William's voice was shaking. "I gambled it away, all of it, over the past 3 months." My legs went weak. I sat down beside him on the bench. "How much, Robert?" "Everything people donated to the building fund, plus money from other church accounts, about $800,000 total." Pastor William made a sound like he'd been punched. $800,000?
I have a gambling problem. I've had it for years. Online poker, sports betting. It started small, just a little entertainment, but it got worse. I'd win sometimes, lose more often. I'd borrow from church funds to cover losses, planning to pay it back when I won big, but I never won big enough. The building fund donations were supposed to save me. I thought I could bet it, double it, put it all back before anyone noticed, but I lost it all in 3 months. I couldn't speak. This man I'd trusted, who I'd considered a friend, had stolen from everyone, from widows on fixed incomes, from young families scraping together donations, from people who believed they were building something for their community. "The receipts you gave us?" I said finally. "They're fake?" "The donations were real. I just never deposited them into a building fund account. I deposited them into my personal account and gambled with them." "My $50,000, I said. "You gambled away my wife's legacy." Robert started crying. "I'm so sorry. I'm sick. I need help. I never meant for it to get this far." Pastor William pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "Please don't. I'll pay it back. I'll get a loan, sell my house." "Robert, you stole $800,000 from the church, from people who trusted you. This isn't something we can handle internally." The police arrived within 15 minutes. They took Robert's statement, then arrested him for embezzlement. As they led him in handcuffs, he looked at me. "David, please forgive me." I didn't answer. I couldn't.
The next weeks were devastating for our church. The news spread through the congregation like wildfire. Robert Chen, trusted treasurer for 12 years, had embezzled $800,000 to feed a gambling addiction. People were angry, hurt, betrayed. Some questioned their faith. Others blamed Pastor William for not having better oversight. Many blamed me for exposing it, as if ignorance would have been better than truth. The police investigation revealed the full scope. Robert had been embezzling for 3 years, starting small, a few thousand here and there from the general fund. He'd cover it up by manipulating the books, creating false receipts, timing deposits carefully. The building fund had been his downfall. The large donations came too fast, too many people knew about them, and I'd started asking questions. Of my $50,000, nothing remained. The Greens' $25,000, gone. The Johnsons' $30,000. The Patterson sisters' $20,000. All of it gambled away online. Robert's house was mortgaged, his retirement accounts depleted. He had nothing left to give back. The church hired a forensic accountant. The final tally was $847,000 stolen over 3 years. Robert pled guilty to multiple counts of embezzlement. The prosecutor recommended 5 years in prison. At his sentencing hearing, Robert's lawyer argued for leniency. "Your Honor, my client has a gambling addiction. He's been attending Gamblers Anonymous. He needs treatment, not prison." Prosecutor Jennifer Marks countered with victim impact statements. 12 of 32 victims agreed to speak. Agnes Patterson, 83, used a walker to reach the podium. "My brother Franklin worked for the Postal Service 42 years, left Ruth and me $40,000. We gave half to the church because Franklin believed in leaving the world better. Robert Chen stole my brother's only legacy, gambled it away online." Tom Breen, "I'm a contractor. That $25,000 was 6 months of labor, could have fixed our leaking roof, could have helped our daughter with college. Instead, we gave it to build something bigger." Robert looked me in the eye, shook my hand, thanked me, while planning to gamble it away. Sarah Thompson spoke through tears. "We're teachers with 2 small children. $12,000 was more than we could afford. We cut groceries, stopped eating out, put off car repairs. I told my daughter we were saving for something important. Now I have to explain it never existed." Helen Martinez, hands shook. $5,000, 2 years of overtime at the library. I'm 65 with arthritis, took every extra shift. Robert deposited my check and bet it on football games. I went 10th. I'm 69. That $50,000 was my late wife Margaret's legacy, 40 years of saving. Before she died, we planned this as our final gift together. Robert stole the last thing my wife and I could do as a team. James Wilson, late 70s, dying of cancer. I have 6 months left. That $15,000 was my memorial. I wanted to leave something behind. Instead, Robert used it to feed his addiction. I'll die knowing my final act of generosity was stolen. The judge sentenced Robert to 7 years in prison and ordered full restitution. But restitution requires money, and Robert had none. The church struggled in ways I never could have imagined. The next Sunday after Robert's arrest, attendance dropped by 40%. Some members couldn't face the building where they'd been betrayed. Others were too angry to worship. Pastor William addressed the congregation, his voice heavy with grief. "I know many of you are hurting. I'm hurting too. I failed in my oversight responsibilities. I trusted too much and verified too little. For that, I'm deeply sorry." But apologies didn't bring back the money. They didn't restore trust. Martha Johnson stood up in the middle of Pastor William's sermon 2 weeks later. "How could you not know?" she demanded. 12 years Robert was stealing, and you never noticed, never checked, never asked to see a bank statement? Martha, you stole $30,000, our retirement savings, and you just let Robert do whatever he wanted with it because you were too trusting or too lazy to do your job? She walked out. Bill Johnson followed. They never came back. The church vestry held an emergency meeting. Tom Green, who'd been elected senior warden the year before, led the discussion. We need complete financial transparency. Every account, every transaction, every penny. No more one person handling money without oversight. They hired an independent accounting firm to audit every church account going back 5 years. The audit took 3 months and cost $15,000 we didn't have, but it revealed the full scope of Robert's embezzlement.
He'd started small 3 years ago. $500 from the discretionary fund, marked as pastoral assistance for a family in need. The family didn't exist. He'd repay it within a few weeks so the books balanced, and no one noticed. Then $1,000 here, $2,000 there, always from different accounts, always with plausible explanations. Music fund equipment purchase that never happened, outreach fund donation to a homeless shelter that didn't receive it, youth group activity expenses for trips that were never taken. The building fund had been his big gamble, literally. He thought he could win enough to pay back everything he'd stolen, plus put money into the actual building fund, becoming the hero who'd raised more than anyone expected. Instead, he'd lost it all. The forensic accountant's final report documented $847,000 stolen over 3 years from 17 different church accounts. The building fund alone accounted for $632,000, money from 43 different donors. 43 families and individuals, most of them elderly, many living on fixed incomes, all betrayed by someone they'd trusted. The congregation split into factions. Some wanted to forgive Robert, arguing that's what Christians should do. "Judge not, lest ye be judged," they said. "He's sick. He needs our prayers, not our condemnation." Others were furious at this response. "Forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences," Helen Martinez said at a church meeting. "Jesus forgave, but he also overturned the money changers' tables. Robert committed a crime. Forgiveness and justice aren't mutually exclusive." The debate became heated, personal. Friends stopped speaking to each other. Committee members resigned. The choir director quit after an argument about whether Robert's wife Linda should still be allowed to sing in the choir. "She didn't steal anything," some argued. "She's a victim too." "She lived with him," others countered. "She must have known something was wrong." Linda Chen stopped coming to church entirely. The ostracism was too much. Her neighbors avoided her. Her friends stopped calling. She'd lost her husband to prison and her community to shame. I felt sorry for her, even as I was angry at Robert. She'd been married to him for 38 years, raised 2 children with him, believed she knew him, then discovered she'd been sleeping beside a thief who'd stolen from elderly widows and sick old men to feed his addiction. "Did you know?" I asked her once, running into her at the grocery store 6 months after Robert's sentencing. She looked at me with hollow eyes. "I knew we had money troubles. I knew he was stressed. He said it was the stock market, bad investments. I believed him because I wanted to, because doubting him meant everything I thought I knew was a lie, and I wasn't strong enough to face that." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. But something else happened, too. The congregation that remained, about 60% of the original membership, became stronger, more vigilant, more involved. We learned painful lessons about the difference between faith and blind trust. We established mandatory oversight committees. Every financial transaction now requires 2 signatures. Monthly bank statements go to 3 different vestry members. An independent accounting firm audits us quarterly. We publish detailed financial reports in the church bulletin. Some said we'd lost our innocence, our ability to trust. I disagreed. We'd lost our naivety. That's different.
We learned that good systems protect good people from temptation and bad people from opportunity. The scholarship fund we started, Margaret Morrison Scholarships, named after my wife, has helped 12 students attend college so far. We can't fund building projects with $800,000 because we don't have it, but we can give $2,000 a year to 6 deserving students. It's smaller, humbler, but it's real, and it helps. I still attend St. Matthew's every Sunday. Some victims never came back, and I understand why. But for me, leaving would mean letting Robert's sin define my faith. The church isn't a building or a bank account. It's the community of believers trying to do right by each other, even when we fail. Pastor William retired 2 years after the scandal. He never recovered from the guilt of not catching Robert's embezzlement earlier. His successor, Pastor Sarah Chen, no relation to Robert, brought fresh energy and rigorous financial standards. She'd worked as a forensic accountant before seminary. If anyone tried to embezzle on her watch, they wouldn't last a week. I forgave Robert, eventually, not because he deserved it, but because carrying anger was destroying me more than the loss of money. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or pretending it hadn't happened. It meant releasing my right to revenge, trusting that justice would be served. 3 years after Robert went to prison, I received a letter. His handwriting, shaky now. I know sorry isn't enough. I destroyed lives, broke trust, betrayed everything I claimed to believe. I'm in treatment, working through my addiction, facing what I did. Not for redemption, I don't deserve that, just because it's right. The Margaret Morrison Scholarships, I read about them in a newspaper article someone sent me. Knowing that something good came from my terrible sin is the only comfort I have. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who could never do this again. I wrote back, 1 sentence, keep trying. I'm 72 now, 3 years after Robert's sentencing. St. Matthew's is slowly rebuilding. We have new leadership, new systems, new hope. The building fund is gone, but we've started a scholarship fund instead, helping young people from our community attend college. It's smaller, more modest, but it's real, and it helps. My $50,000 is still gone. I'll never get it back. But I learned something valuable. Institutions are only as trustworthy as the systems they create from abuse. Faith is beautiful, but blind faith is dangerous. Trust, but verify. Hope, but protect. Believe in people, but build safeguards. I share my story now with other churches, other organizations that rely on trust and good intentions. I explain how embezzlement happens, how addicts rationalize stealing from people they care about, how oversight and accountability aren't signs of mistrust, but acts of love, protecting both the vulnerable and the tempted. Because Robert Chen wasn't a monster. He was a sick man who lacked the strength to ask for help before he destroyed lives. And that's scarier than a monster, because it means any of us, given the right circumstances and wrong choices, could become the villain in someone else's story. My name is David Morrison. I'm 72 years old. I gave $50,000 to my church's building fund, and the treasurer gambled it away. I lost my wife's legacy, but I gained wisdom I wish I didn't need. And I'm using that wisdom to make sure others don't learn the same lesson the hard way, because the cost of that education is too high.